own fruit and vegetables is, well, surprisingly easy. And let me tell you, there is nothing more rewarding. Imagine Sunday lunch, where some of the produce on your plate is from things that you've actually grown yourself. Fantastic. And the opportunity to be, well, dirty hands but creative with you and all the family involved in the process, where you get tangible, edible results, to some is just, well, overwhelming. But, top tip, if you're just starting out, start off small and only grow the things that you really love. You can, of course, grow lots more as your enthusiasm grows, along with your plants. The first thing you need to do is decide where you're going to grow your fruit and vegetables. Now, most prefer an open, sunny position, but protected from prevailing winds. However, if you've only got semi-shade, don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. There are many vegetables like kale and spinach which will thrive. If you want to grow your own fruit and vegetables, or, well, any plant for that matter, it's a good idea to get to know what type of soil you have. Because the type of soil you have will determine what plants you can grow, but also how you sort of work and manage the soil, because they all behave slightly differently. Soil is made up of sand, silt, clay, organic matter, and sort of air pockets thrown in. And it's the ratio of these ingredients which will tell you what you've got. Clay soil is easy to spot. It's thick, it's wet in winter, sometimes difficult to dig too, but however it's fantastic because it does hold on to lots of water in summer and lots of nutrients too. However, never go in and dig or cultivate a clay soil, especially when it's wet, because you'll compact it down into a sort of airless mass, and real plants really hate growing in those conditions. Sandy soil at the other end of the spectrum is incredibly free draining, which is useful, but you will find you'll need to apply more fertiliser perhaps, and certainly more water than you originally expected. To determine the type of soil you've got, it's dead straightforward really. Let me show you how. What I've got here is three sort of different soils. I've got a clay soil in the middle, I've got a sandy soil, and I've got a silty soil, just to show you basically what they look like so you can take this and do it in your own garden. What you do is you get a handful of soil and you sort of get up close and personal with it really, and you sort of start moulding it around in your hands. Clay soil is easy to spot, of course, because you'll find it will mould into a ball and it will smear between thumb and forefinger, just like that. Okay, that's your classic clay soil there. If it feels gritty and it doesn't easily form a ball, it's going to be a sort of sandy soil. If it feels soapy, silky, and it sort of squeaks a bit when you rub it between your fingers, and it sort of forms a partial ball but crumbles apart easily, it's a soil with a high proportion of silt. But here's a top tip: don't despair if your soil looks or feels less than ideal. You can improve it with lashings of organic matter, be it peat-free compost, your own homemade compost, or, well, rotted horse manure. Adding lots of the stuff will really improve any soil, and as a gardener, I absolutely swear by it. Now, you want to give your vegetables and your fruit the best possible start, but before you go digging, you've got to get rid of the weeds. Best thing to do is just grab a hoe like this and work your way over the plot that you plan to plant into, removing all the weeds. And then you just cover the area that you've weeded with, say, black landscape fabric to stop them coming back. Now, you shouldn't need to use a weed killer, but there is an exception, and that's if you're faced with lots and lots of perennial weeds. Now, a perennial weed is a weed that lives longer than a year. Plants like bindweed, horsetail, identifiable by its sort of long bottle brush-like plumes of foliage. You kind of need to knock them on the head quite hard before you start going in and growing your own. So at that point, if you're faced with a couple can be dug out with a fork. The reason you go for a fork is because, of course, you can then get the roots out as well, and it's the roots that we need to take care of. But if you're faced with a heck of a lot, unfortunately, you're probably going to need to go in with a translocated weed killer. That's one which contains glyphosate as the active ingredient. It will say on the pack. And the reason you use glyphosate as opposed to, say, a weed killer which, well, has a sort of contact action, it only kills what it touches, is that glyphosate travels down the whole system of the plant from the foliage into the roots, and it kills the roots, and that is, as I say, what you want to kill. Now, I don't like using weed killers in the garden, I really don't, but if I'm faced with the worst cases of perennial thuggery, I will reach for a glyphosate-based weed killer. But once you've done it once, or perhaps twice if it's particularly pernicious, you never need to use them again. For more information on how to start growing your own fruit and veg, see the other guides to getting started at the end of the film.